Hello all, welcome to What the Flick, talking about the Brink, the new HBO show about the world annihilation. John, Alonso, and Ben, they're trying to make that funny. I don't know whether they did here in this first episode. They created an interesting character because we thought Tim Robbins appears to be nothing but a buffoon, even when his Kendra gets him out of his hooker situation and into the car, and he's like, tell me everything about Pakistan, and you figure he doesn't know anything, and then all of a sudden in the Situation Room, he's the smartest guy in the room and the voice of reason. So that's what I liked about that.
I thought that was intended to show that she briefed him very quickly.
Exactly,
He's
yeah.
good at,
He was doing
he's
the
good at
talking
taking
points.
a small amount of information and appearing to be an expert. But again, as you said, he was the one who I think was being the most reasonable. Although, of course, we do have an actual psychotic guy with nuclear weapons, so perhaps he's wrong.
I don't think so. I mean, I think, yes, she briefed him, but that meant briefing on what has just happened because he was recalling deep stuff. Like he is not going to turn out to be a fool.
I don't know. I mean, she's talking about like binders that she had given him that he hadn't read, so I could see that she was maybe just giving him the.
Or maybe he
quick
did actually
highlights.
read them, but he likes being the goofball who implies
I think he likes
has
being the
them.
goofball. There was too much stuff in there, and he was also like, you know, your strategy is always wrong. Like he was fully committed to that. Give me 24 hours. He knew right away that Jack Black was not a guy that he knew.
No, but he did technically know him.
Yeah, because Jack Black talks
hookers
about
for
how
him.
he'd gotten hookers for him.
The blonde Asian
He tells
twins.
Aziz Manvi that.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah, but you're right to point out that he was all in because if he was actually the slacker, know-nothing, he wouldn't commit so strong.
Yeah,
he would throw up some token resistance and then he'd back
No,
off.
it's going
but
to
he's
turn
not.
out. I think it's going to turn out that he is incredibly smart and a thoughtful. I don't want to go to war. We got to try to avoid this. There are back channels that we can do.
Although I think what the show's trying to say is that the much of what happens in the Situation Room is more about personal one-upmanship than it is about actual diplomacy.
And possibly hunger.
That too. I don't know. It's a pilot. I'm hesitant to judge a show based on one episode, but it's not grabbing me yet.
No, it definitely did.
This I was telling John earlier. This kind of feels like the USA Network version of Dr. Strangelove, where it's just kind of cheap and the jokes are kind of obvious and. I don't know. I'm not loving it.
It's a weird tone. Because I think what they want is they want to take a serious situation and have it be funny. But it kind of felt more like serious situation, a little bit funny, serious situation, a little bit funny. Like it didn't feel consistent. Like you have the president who is like, come on, could this get any worse? Like it was just such a weird performance from him.
Isai Morales.
Isai Morales is the president.
Yeah,
That was
it
a cool
was just
touch.
such a weird performance. But at the same time, like I'm not a big Jack Black fan. I'm at best neutral on Jack Black. But once him and Asif Manvi are on the run, their storyline is I want to see more of that. I want to see him sort of be. He says that he wants to change the world, and he's mostly just set people up with hookers, but he actually was willing to take a risk to fax those documents. Asif Manvi's in a very difficult situation. I think that's an interesting set of scenes.
I agree. It didn't anti-grab me. It just
didn't push you.
It didn't push me. Right. That's right.
I did like Asif Manvi's family and how they all know the real story about the Jack Black character. And they're like,
oh,
hello.
Yeah.
And then the Random House thing, that was really funny. I don't know. It feels like the targets are really sort of obvious and easy, and I don't know that the show has anything to say except for like, whoa, we're all crazy here, and HBO does Veep, you know, like they have raised their own bar for this kind of thing.
I was about to make that point because you made it yesterday, and I was going to give you credit. Like Veep does a great thing in that it takes some serious issues, although it doesn't delve nearly as deeply into them. But Veep manages to avoid the circumstance that this show got itself into, where we had the scene of the losing candidate for the presidency, the former head of the ISI, and the president say, who's that? And then that get explained to him. I mean, George Bush would have known that, for crying out loud, like that. And that is a moment that takes you out of a show, a dramatic moment where, to fill the audience in, they make their own characters ignorant about things.
If they would know.
Of course they would know. I mean, you're the president.
Like I can't tell you, I'm the president. We don't know.
Right.
Of course, they didn't mean that they weren't going to tell you.
And Veep never gets itself into that situation.
Yeah, well,
and I think that's a really, instantly I was like, oh, here we go with
And
this.
specifically, Armando Iannucci, who does Veep, also did the movie In the Loop, which is closer to this in terms of being about, is there going to be a
Something
war?
serious, right.
How do we deal with it? And is, so far, at least based on the pilot, In the Loop, way smarter, way funnier.
Have you seen In the Loop?
No,
you would love
and darker, you know.
Yeah, also the I guess the handling of this is about a situation developing in the Middle East, and I'm sure that they're getting some pushback because they're talking about Pakistan suffering a coup d'état, and they have a radical come into power. But do they ever say that he's an Islamic radical? Like, it seems like they don't want to be very specific, even though the show is about this situation. They just say, oh, he's a radical, and we're going to make him crazy. He doesn't actually have an ideology that we can oppose. Well, he's a crazy person.
They presented him as fervently anti-Israeli and anti-American, and I think we're supposed to just
can mean a lot of things.
I think we're just supposed to sort of take Muslim as read, given the context of the show. They don't dwell on it, granted.
Yeah. Even the conversation the president has with, I guess they're saying the prime minister of Israel, whatever, is very weird. I don't think that they would like that over there. Well, he's like complaining on the phone to the president.
Yeah,
it's hard not to think about the last season of Homeland, which also was set in and around the
super similar. Yeah,
the Pakistani embassy.
As soon as he went to the Pakistani embassy, I was like, oh, Carrie will be there.
Yeah, no, totally. Yeah, and I think they both shot it at the LA Center Studios. So yeah, I don't know. I'm willing to ride this out for a bit and see where this goes, but it's not.
No, it wasn't. There were real flaws, and it was like, it was too much of it was dumbed down when it didn't need to be. That it requires deft writing to do this political stuff, and I didn't think it was there. Calling his assistant Kendra, who's clearly a genius, back to say, "Would you want the egg roll or the soup?" I'll have the soup. I'll have both.
Like too greasy.
That was the hardest. That was the hardest I laughed.
Well, and the thing is also, I watched this right after the premiere of the True Detective season 2, and I was reminded during that episode how Nick Pizzolatto will throw out police jargon and not tell you what it means.
Right.
Like I was watching with two people, and there's some like, not all points bulletin, but something obscure or some little 3-letter thing. And I was watching with other people, and the guy said it, and I found out, oh, and I said what it was, and they were like, oh, thank God, because we had no idea what they were talking about. And this show won't do that. It won't send you to Google. It's going to like underline everything for you.
Yeah, and that's I think a mistake with the audience that it is hoping to get.
Yeah,
I think they're making a mistake there, and that, of course, no show has done that better than The Wire, which was just started off with a fuck you, don't care. Don't care whether you know what we're talking about, but you learn, and it was great.
Yeah. One other thought that I had is I'm not normally the person to notice this or recognize this. I'm trying to be a little bit more aware. But aside from Kendra, who has a small part, are there any female characters in this entire show?
And the head of the CIA.
The head of the CIA.
Is she a character?
I said,
she has a line or two.
The
prostitute.
Asif Manvi's sister.
And Asif Manvi's sister is going to be hit on soon.
And the mother, who was
the mother was
also
good.
funny.
Yeah, I guess that's true. I'm just saying they're not of the leads of the show. Yeah. They're all kind of similar. Asif Manvi's a little bit different, but they're very similar main leading male characters.
Yeah, but I mean, yes, but they're also buffoonish.
And they're set, and it's set in the world of diplomacy, which I think attracts a certain type of person.
Perhaps.
It was funny when the head of the CIA popped up. I was like, "Is that Mimi Kennedy, or have they cast a Mimi Kennedy type?" Right. It was indeed Mimi Kennedy.
It was indeed Mimi Kennedy. Yeah. So anyway, we take that his foil there to be the Secretary of Defense, probably.
I'm thinking,
so,
I first thought that was the vice president, but I think it's either way. It doesn't matter.
The vice president is at a corn shucking,
Oh, do they?
No, I'm
that's right. Because it'd be great, by the way, if she were cast as
that'd be the best.
That interaction between the Secretary of State and Secretary of Defense might have been the funniest line about the Radcliffe and all that. I don't know. It was an amazingly funny show, but it had a few good lines.
There are some ideas here that could reach fruition if they were handled well. I'm not super confident yet that they will be, but I'm willing to keep going and see where this goes.
We will be back to discuss it again next week, episode 2 of The Brink. Thanks for watching, everybody.